Hello, this is David Oflichek from ARC 531, Advanced Architecture History, going over Project 1.0 and my work that I chose called A View of Venice, and it was created in 1500. So, The View of Venice by Jacopo de Barbari is created in 1500. It took 3 years to produce and was actually crafted onto wood blocks and was used as part of the advancing printing press during Venice at the time. Venice was a center for the evolution into the printing press, especially in Central Europe area. There's a lot that's going on in this piece, and this is zoomed out quite a bit, but an incredible amount of detail went into every building, every feature, and even the mythology. It took 3 years, so a lot of effort and research had to be done and prepared by Jacopo. And he was sponsored by quite a wealthy person, and the piece also sold for a lot of money afterwards. Um, no air travel was present at the time. This print is completely imagined in the mind through reference, of course. Jacopo used potentially towers or other structures around Venice to gather the proportions and the information needed to create this piece. The perspective that I wanted to take this piece on from was that of a nautical perspective, as Venice is a maritime, almost democracy, but a republic during this time period. I almost want to compliment Jacopo with his ability to accurately portray Venice from a view that could not have been done at the time with a literal uh, reference photo. And what is shown here is a grid placed over what the actual, because we know today, the actual proportions of Venice and the island at the time. And below is the view of Venice and that grid superimposed over what was depicted by Jacopo. His reference materials were few. Well, it's actually not quite known what exactly he had from some comparable works that were already completed. There were some that we don't have any knowledge of today, but we know that they were around. So those definitely played a role in his information gathering. However, his work was original, um, best comparable to the view of Florence from the southwest. And it was a work that was completed approximately 20 to 30 years before he was working on this project in Venice. And it is similar, but its proportions are very different, and maybe more so the idea of what occurred for this view of Florence pieces may have inspired, especially because it was completed in a similar way. It was done on wood blocks, made into prints. There was also a painting done, which is shown here, but this is similar to what Jacopo's approach was with the Venice map. Other reference materials that he probably have gathered in the 3 years that he was working on this piece were the engineering maps and infrastructure, like I mentioned earlier, the towers and higher points, and also a German background, which did result in some confusion when when the piece was first created. The author wasn't specifically listed on the piece. It was originally thought to have been someone else, specifically Dürer, who is a successful German woodcutter. So once again, very similar technique to what was actually done. Now, going into the elements of the piece that I thought were interesting and portrayed the life or the thoughts of people during the time was first, of course, the mythology that stood out the most. What we see in the water, since water is a crucial part of Venetian life, is the not king, the god Neptune, and he is the god of the sea. He is thought to have protected them from troubling waters. And above, which is not shown here, this is Neptune, but above is looking over Venice is the god of Mercury, and his role is more of commerce and success with they are a mercantile, maritime community. They have succeeded through trade and have facilitated trade through the water. Uh, Going into a lot of the detail, there's not many people on like the mainland of Venice, but there are people on the boats, and there's a lot of effort put into the boats around Venice and in the Venice and the canals and such. And we see on the left here an arsenal, and one of the big successes of Venice was their naval armada, especially before the 1600s. It was eventually um, Napoleon pretty much vanquished the Venetian Armada at 1800. But up to then, there was a lot of success with their navy, and especially with crusades and other conflicts with the Ottoman Empire. We see in the arsenal here one of their most prestigious boats, which I'll go into in a second. And on the right is a shipyard, one of several that is depicted in the piece, which is the one shown is right next to the arsenal. And those private shipyards were called squeri, and yeah, there were many of them around Venice. It was a crucial part of its economy. And that expensive, fancy boat that I was talking about was a bucintoro, and it is made of gold and red purple fabric, and it was rowed by the Doge, and the Doge is the highest point of office for the Venetian Republic, and uh, they were technically elected by more so of a panel, not by the people, but the Venice succeeded partially in being a democracy and fair for the people. Every year they have what is called an Ascension Day, and they have a huge procession of boats that go through the canal. And in that procession, this was the main piece, the Bucintoro. It was a symbol of the wealth and prosperity, especially of the Doge. So taking all that into perspective, when looking at the overall view, once again, of view of Venice, there are boats all around, and I wanted to point out that there's even uh, boats that are being repaired or salvaged over here, docked boats, and the Venetian fleet at the time composed of several different invented, uh, including the galley and other boats that were developed significantly by the Venetians. There's even agricultural boats in the southern part of the work here. And there are a ton of just simpler boats for people coming into Venice, going over. You can see the ripples of the water here that are much larger, and the waves are even captured here compared to around the northeastern bank of Venice are much more troubling and difficult to get through. So even that was a consideration by Jacopo. There are fishing boats, and barely visible are some islands that are annotated as well in the northeastern part. One thing that has significantly changed is their naval armada and how they um, how they make money, their economy. It's now a place of tourism, and it kind of grants an insight into the time that this is taking place and how their success wasn't one as we see it today, where it's just a beautiful place beautifully incorporated with water. Venice was a lot greater than that, especially at this time period. It was um, much greater local significance in the world than we even think of it as a tourist marvel today. And thanks for listening.